Freddie Mercury is one of the most iconic rock musicians. A vocalist and pianist of the rock band Queen, he would establish his legacy as a songwriter and singer, entertaining masses with his 4-octave vocal range and iconic songs like Killer Queen and Crazy Little Thing Called Love. His musical journey started young, with Freddie forming his first band, Hectics, at 12 years old. His musical talent and his flamboyant musical talent made him one of the most popular artists. Freddie Mercury's house was as flamboyant as his stage persona. He bought a house in Kensington, an elite neighbourhood in London, where he lived from 1980 until his death from pneumonia in 1991. Like most of his private life, Freddie Mercury kept his home private. His desire for privacy is probably one of the factors that drew him to this property, which sat behind an 8-foot tall privacy wall. Along this wall is a green door that serves as the entrance to this private estate. After his death, the wall and this door became a memorial for Mercury's fans, who left letters, flowers and graffiti. The door would sell in an auction, having gained a life of its own as a pilgrimage for this musical genius. Initially, the auctioneers listed the door with an asking price of under $50,000, eventually selling for a remarkable £412,750. The house, which sits on a 1-acre landscaped lot, is a detached house in the Neo-Georgian architectural style. It was originally built in 1908 for the artist couple Cecil Ray and Constance Halford, who lived in the home until their deaths. The house was designed by architect Ernest William Marshall. It's a 2-story detached brick house with 8 bedrooms. Freddie encountered this house during his house hunt, alongside his close friend, Mary Austin. He was sold upon seeing the house and wanted to buy it immediately. With proceeds from his latest commercial success, he bought the property in cash for £500,000. After this purchase, he would spend the next decade curating it into his haven. By his admission, Mercury wanted to lead a Victorian life, surrounded by exquisite clutter. In the next few years, he dedicated his life to filling this house with exquisite clutter from his travels, performances, and personal life. He worked with interior designer and architect Robin Moore Eade to renovate the house. Mary Austin, his former partner, a close friend, and heir, also helped execute Mercury's wishes regarding how he wanted the house decorated to turn it into his country house in London. His dining room was one of the places he let out an expression of himself. He painted the walls citrus yellow, his favourite colour, and added touches of jewel tones to the corner of the room. Having grown up in colonial Zanzibar, Freddie Mercury retained some of the mannerisms he had picked up there, notably his love for formal dining. He set up his dining room with a formal dining table with seating for 10 people. Whenever he hosted dinners in this room, he would insist on setting the table with his collection of diningware, tablecloths, and name seating. Mercury hosted dinners in this room. Some notable people he hosted in his home include Montserrat Caballé, Tim Rice, Elaine Page, and Mary Austin's birthday. Beyond the dining was a double-height drawing room with bay windows that gave Mercury unobstructed views of his landscaped garden. Opposite these windows was a cherished painting of a young boy on a sofa by Geza Vashtag. This painting became such an essential part of Mercury's final days when he was bedridden and incapable of enjoying the views of his garden. He wanted the painting hung overlooking the garden, a way for him to vicariously enjoy the view through the painting. The drawing room also housed his Yamaha baby grand piano, which he used to compose some of his classic songs like Bohemian Rhapsody. Speaking of which, the handwritten lyrics to the song sold on auction, capturing the changes Mercury made when writing the song, including a title change from Mongolian Rhapsody. The piano took centre stage in Mercury's musical compositions from 1975 until his 1991 death. It sold at a Sotheby's auction for a record $2.2 million. Although his house was large, Mercury was invested in turning it into a homely and welcoming space for the guests he often hosted. He added a bar where he and his guests would entertain. Near the bar was a library and a music room. His book collection featured more than 100 books, reflecting his multidisciplinary literary interests. In addition to stocking books on his shelf, Mercury also displayed some of his own bronze statues, including an Irina Sedlika bronze model of himself. His living room was another space that Freddie invested in, filling it with Japanese-themed collectibles. Some of the Japanese elements inside his living room included Japanese lacquer boxes, porcelain, and Japanese lamps. He displayed his favourite artwork here, including Joseph Tissot's portrait of Mrs. Kathleen Newton. As a lover of Japanese art, Mercury would build a notable collection of it. This collection included Ukiyo Air woodblock prints, ceramics from the Taisho and Showa periods, lacquer from the Edo period, a rare 17th century porcelain kokumin bowl, and Japanese silk kimonos. He dedicated an entire private room to his Japanese collection. This room often referred to as his Japanese living room, featured antique furniture from Japan. He also displayed some of his porcelain collections in a 19th century bronze-mounted French vitrine. In addition to Japanese art, Mercury also had some items from China. A notable item was a 20th century Chinese wood-carved armchair, dubbed Freddie's Dragon Throne. This armchair is one of the first artistic pieces that Freddie collected after graduating from art school. He also had a Chinese stand built in the Qing style in his home, but these were not the only vintage furniture in Freddie Mercury's home. He had other notable pieces collected from the many countries that he visited. He had 19th century furniture from Austria-Hungary, an Art Nouveau cabinet, a Louis XV commode, and a George III giltwood mirror thought to have been made in the 18th century. He also had a Liberty clock, thought to have been made around 1905. His home was also filled with prints, including Goya prints, watercolours from William Russell Flint, and decorative items from Cartier, Lalique, Fabergé, and Tiffany. He also displayed his personal artwork inside his home. He also displayed his iconic stage memorabilia, including his crown and cloak. His upstairs primary suite was another notable part of his mansion. At the entrance of this suite was an octagonal dressing room with a mirrored ceiling and walls. The dressing room opened to his bedroom, where he spent his final days. Outside his career as a musician, Freddie Mercury was an avid collector. He started collecting stamps when he was young, a hobby he picked up from his father. He would collect stamps from his native Zanzibar, Britain, India, and Monaco, which he compiled in a stamp album. The Postal Museum in London bought his stamp album in 1993. His stamp collection career lasted between the ages of 9 and 12 before he moved on to other things. As an adult, Mercury was a collector of vintage items and art, some of which he kept in his new home. He collected artwork from different artists, including Dali, Brouet, Picasso, and Chagall. His collection was not built as an investment, but rather as a reflection of the pieces that he found interesting. Beyond his eclectic house was a landscaped garden which his partner, Jim Hutton, contributed to. The garden features large magnolia trees, multicoloured rose flowers, and Japanese-inspired water features. Mercury achieved his dream of turning his home into a space that represented who he was, his interests, and his artistic leanings. Although the early years after purchasing the house were spent on tours, his final years were spent in this house, writing music and entertaining friends and guests. Freddie Mercury bequeathed his home to Mary Austin, who preserved the home for the next 30 years after Mercury's death. Mary, finally ready to close that chapter of her life, auctioned Freddie Mercury's personal items, art, furniture, and collections. The auction raised more than $50 million, part of which was donated to the Mercury Phoenix Trust and the Elton John AIDS Foundation. Later, the house was placed on the market for $38 million, making it the first time that the house was on the market in 45 years. While the auction and the house listing are part of Mary's efforts to put her affairs in order, she also found an auction to be the best way to finally honour the collection that Freddie Mercury amassed over the years, often from auctions. What do you think of this move? Would you rather his home be turned into a museum in his honour, or do you think that the auction was the best way to honour his life and collection? Thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our new celebrity home content.